We are live. Hey everyone, it's Sleepy Reader with the hangout, the after party from our All-Star Superman community crossover, where we each of the people I invited, because I didn't actually do an issue. Each person took an individual issue of the All-Star Superman series and talked about it. And now those of us who can make it are going to talk about Superman and All-Star Superman. So I don't know, each say hi, starting with on my left, Carlos.
Hi everyone, how's everyone doing? Uh, so Superman. I've been a little since I was 4 years old. I mean, my mom says she started up with because she bought me like a little pajama back then, but I don't remember. I remember a Halloween costume that I wore. So, uh, reading comics and for 14 years, I read so much Superman. Of all the eras, that when I got into reading All-Star Superman, a lot of that sort of reminded me of like the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, and it made me understand why people don't like Superman, because the current Superman is so stripped down version, and Grant Morrison brought a lot of that which Superman lost. uh, the sci-fi elements that were part of the Silver Age, the more intellectual Superman from the Bronze Age, and now we have this sort of Superman that is just powers and muscle and none of that uh, other stuff that a lot of people really liked about him, growing up.
So I probably didn't phrase it right, but I guess we can say hello and then we're each saying what our background with Superman is and if reading All-Star Superman changed our view of Superman. So next is La Rasa, or Rasa, from England.
Hi everybody. I read All-Star Superman. Actually, was the first time I actually read Superman book. I only have watched movies, and I first introduced to the Superman as a character was through the movies. Like Christopher Reeve was my Superman, and I got to understand what the characters was all about. So when I always heard about, as I said previously on my video, I always heard about All-Star Superman from, of course, YouTube and the YouTube comic book community. So yeah, and then I was always wanted to read, but then I got this chance for actually doing a review because of Sleepy inviting me to do this. So yeah, this is when I start actually first time read the comic itself about the Superman. And after reading it, I actually really do like the way it was portrayed. However, I am not really sure what kind of portrayal was before that, of the Superman as a character.
I see Superman and He-Man just behind you.
Yeah. Yeah, I just recently get hold of that. My husband is a huge fan of He-Man, so and I was like, okay, this is perfect. I found this one, so it's kind of introduction for me as well in the He-Man world.
Cool. Okay, Mr. Reedham Steven is up next. Hi.
Hey, what's up, everybody? What started with me with Superman is I think the movies, and it wasn't really like the Christopher Reeve stuff. It was kind of when Brandon Routh was the Superman, and the movie was okay, but I was mostly into Superman with kind of like mainstream, with all this marketing, and I got his T-shirt and stuff like that, but I really didn't dive into the comics till maybe when I first started collecting, maybe like 2 or 3 years ago. And I found All-Star Superman because, and that was actually my first story, that Superman story I ever read, because I wanted to learn more about the character. So I went on CBR, and they had these top 100 Superman stories, and I just really wanted to read the best. So when I saw All Star Superman, I think it was like #1 or #2. I decided to check it out, and that's really what kind of started the whole, my love for Superman and my interest in the character over the years. So that's really how it started.
Okay, that's great. Matt, Wednesday Serial. Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Great.
Yeah, I can't honestly recall when I first really encountered Superman. It was probably somewhere around like the Bruce Timm cartoons or something. But as far as delving into this comic, I remember getting the trades pretty quickly as soon as they were actually trades. And my impression was that it was going to be a lot more like a DC Ultimization sort of thing, which is kind of what they were trying to go for, I remember reading about. And then instead you got this really concise Superman tale, by all accounts, that does kind of go all over but comes back, and it really kind of blew me away, but it also kind of took me aback because I'm expecting, the start of something completely new, and instead you get a actual story. So I've had to come back to it a few times to appreciate it for what it really is.
And my history with Superman goes back to when I was a kid watching that 1950s Superman show with, what's his name, George Reeve, which I always had, as a kid, I had a love-hate relationship with because I kept wanting to see Superman do something really exciting. But all he did is stick out his chest and have bullets bounce off of it, basically. And then when I discovered comics, I would pick up Supermans here and there, and they would have these gorgeous, like, Neil Adams covers because it was the 70s, and then they would have this very stiff Kurt Swan art on the inside, and I always had trouble with that. But I kept reading Superman on and off over the years, like when Gil Kane did it, when John Byrne did it. But I think I kind of forgot what was interesting about Superman until I came across All-Star Superman. It was actually the issue I read of All-Star Superman, the Jimmy Olsen issue. And it just reminded me or told me what was all the cool stuff in Superman. I feel like now I can go back to some of the old Superman and appreciate it more because Grant Morrison kind of taught me how to look at it or something. Made me appreciate it better. So, Carlos, are you still there? We're not hearing anything from Carlos, and we're just seeing his icon. I'm going to try re-inviting him. Oh, you are there, Carlos?
I think he's still there.
Wait. Yeah, I'm here.
Maybe just a bad connection.
Yeah.
Well, I thought next we'd just give a sort of more overall thoughts about All-Star Superman. I guess we'll start with Larasa. Since this was it's your thoughts on Superman and your thoughts on All-Star Superman are kind of one and the same thing.
Okay.
What did you, reading the whole series, what did you think of it?
As a whole, story was really good. Individual breakdowns there, like issues. Maybe some of them were really hyped up and I really enjoyed it. Some of them were like for example, issue which I reviewed, and like 7th and 8th were very difficult, and you had to get a lot of kind of, in a way, patience and then willingness to actually read it and understand where it goes, especially with Bizarro as a character. No wonder why he's called Bizarro at the end of the day. So, but overall, as a whole thing, actually, I really, really did enjoy. I like the naivety, kind of when the Superman became such a kind of a being dying in that situation. It just made me feel like, okay, kind of in a way, I actually like this character. I never thought that I could actually dislike it because I have never, kind of read any comic books. So yeah, Overall, the series were really good. I really like Louis Lane portrayal. I actually really enjoyed like watching Frank Whiteley's art and the way he was, giving those characters their own, in a way, or different way perspective again, where I knew of Louis Lane or Superman. So I really like that. Yeah. So overall, it's I actually kind of didn't, this has kind of opened the world for me of the Superman and what Superman has, how many characters does he have, supporting characters there's so many things to learn about. And actually this 12 issues actually made me more curious about character itself. Maybe I just wanted like I looked it up seeing those Neil Adams covers of Superman, and it looks really good. After the first time when I just looked it up, Superman, I felt a little bit, it looked awkward the way it quietly drew him as a character. But after reading the 12 issues, I started liking it even more. So when I see a Superman drawing, I kind of judge it now, comparing it to Frank Quality's art. So very interesting. So yeah, overall, I really did enjoy it.
So we need to figure out what your next Superman should be.
Oh yeah, you guys have to
All-Star
recommend it.
Superman. That's a trick. I have to think about that. Maybe I have some ideas.
Yeah.
Carlos, are you back?
Yeah, I'm just having a little problem with the light here because it's so cloudy. I don't have enough light now. I'm looking all red. So I don't know.
Well, as long as we can hear you is really the important thing.
Yeah, well, here I am.
Do you want to give us your overall thoughts on the experience of reading All-Star Superman?
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, Grant really he constructed this Superman, just taking bits and pieces of the best elements of the character and create a very rich character with, like I said, all these sci-fi elements from the Silver Age, the more intellectual version of the 70s, little bits of the post-crisis stuff as well. And I think that's what made this version of Superman very appealing. Because it just wasn't stripped down. He was a very complex character, and as always, he was the optimist. And this version of version of Superman, if you've read like For Crisis, you get a bit of that Superman that's very smart, very positive. The same could be said about Supergirl in Final Crisis, where he just said, they got this super brain, so they should do a lot of stuff. There aren't just physical beings. They're supposed to be super smart. In All Star, we see Superman doing experiments. Finding a way out of situations using his brain, outsmarting villains or adversaries, and a lot of that is lost in the mainstream Superman. He just basically when he say, "Oh, I'm going to himself a problem," then the problem is to much better and ignore all of that from the 60s and the 70s, where he wasn't just and punches himself out of problem. He thinks himself out of problems.
Yeah, I noticed that a lot with the 70s Superman that I've read. He's always solving problems, almost like solving mysteries and coming up with a solution to them.
Daniel's story from the 70s,
we're really losing your audio.
There was a
Maybe we can come back to you in a little bit if it's clearer.
Yeah.
Stephen, overall thoughts about this was a reread of All-Star Superman for you.
Oh yeah. After reading it, it just solidified how much I love this story, and if there was ever a story that if fans really want to know what Superman really is all about, you just read the story here, and you could be done with it. You don't have like. I think about it. It's like, can this story ever be topped? And it's just like it could be the end all be all story that fans could just read, and they don't have to read a single another Superman story ever. Because I just want them to experience this because it just brings all the elements, all the characters, the right way. I think Grant Morrison did a great job of just giving each character their own time, their own issue, and I just like the journey of Superman, facing death and what he had to go through, and I know Roger, he did issue 10. I don't know if he mentioned this, but my favorite part of probably the whole, probably of the issue, probably of the whole series. Let me see if I can look for it. But it's when Superman just kind of takes, he does all these, doing all these feats and stuff. But when this girl Regan, she's on top of the roof, and she's about to commit suicide, and Superman just is there and just gives her a hug and just says like, and I saw this Mark Waid did an intro to this, and he talks about the quote saying Superman tells Regan, "You're much stronger than you think you are," and gives her a hug, and that's just kind of like everything about Superman that I love, and I just wish that the New 52 would kind of focus more on the human element. And I know that they're driving towards like an alien aspect. They're trying to do more stories towards that. And I just wish we kind of got more of that because with the New 52, you brought in a lot more new readers. New readers picking up comics and stuff. And I just wish that they got that in the beginning, and they experienced that first before having to go through Superman and as an alien and all these other villains and stuff. But yeah, All-Star Superman is it's a brilliant story, and I don't know if it will ever be topped. It's that Frank Wiley and Grant Morrison and Superman, and it's just, I don't know. So yeah.
Thanks.
All right.
And then Matt, who is our kind of special guest star, he helped me do the kickoff of All-Star Superman. Did you get a chance to reread it, or did you reread it just before we started?
Yeah, I reread it before we started talking about it. So I had everything fresh in my mind, so I could watch all the videos. What kind of hits me about this is whenever I think about Superman, I kind of place him in the Trinity. So you have Batman, who's very crime fighter, detective focused, whatever, on that sort of level. And then you have Wonder Woman, who's supposed to be more of the magic. So then, yeah, like you were saying, you get more of the sci-fi alien stuff with Superman. And what kind of hit me was there's that beautiful page that you just brought up, Steve, and it stands on its own there, and it's a small part in the middle of all this crazy stuff of the Kryptonians coming back, and them going into the bottled city of Kandor and dealing with that. Like, the human elements are there in the story, but they're small parts to tell the story. The story itself is very much dressed in sci-fi, and if you just kind of flip through, you'll see the colors and the crazy landscapes, and it's very science fiction in the visuals. But
Right.
the character and where it rests is in the humanity. And I think it's that juxtaposition, the more I think about it, that really is what creates Superman for me. It's that sort of tangible sci-fi, I guess, if that makes sense. So that's where my head is this minute. I'll probably change.
Well, leading on from that, I feel like Morrison took all these elements, which Carlos was also saying, all these elements that were already there, and he found like the perfect balance of them all, a perfect alchemy of Superman's humanity, his science fiction-ishness, um, his mythological kind of side to him. And I don't know why other writers don't take more cues from this. Maybe they just figure there's no way to top All-Star Superman, so they go off in other directions. But I really actually wish they would, try to find a little more of those ways to put those elements together. I feel like recently, what's his name? Greg Pak's run comes closer to that, maybe.
It
That's
does
some
for a
optimism.
little while. Yeah, it does for a little while, but but the recent event, Doomed,
Doomed.
yeah, it really stopped the momentum that Greg Pak was creating. It got really confusing as the event started wearing on, with Doomsday, and then you add Brainiac, and then it just becomes this huge war in space, and it just gets lost. Superman fighting Doomsday was still there, but it's got lost, and with all the storylines and all, there was a lot of characters in that thing, so yeah, I'm kind of off on Greg Pak just a little bit.
Uh-huh.
I'll be kind of I don't know what his next run or his next storyline is going to be, but I'm going to be hesitant in trying it out because Dooms was kind of it was kind of bad.
I skipped Doomed just assuming I could come back when it's over and that Greg Pak would just continue with what he was doing, but maybe Doomed steered him so far off course he won't be able to get back.
To me, Doom seems like a bunch of ideas thrown together.
Yeah.
Let's do that. Let's put this guy, So we don't have a game plan for the story.
We lost you again, Carlos. Your audio just seems to go out. Can you try again? Try talking.
In Doom, just threw stuff and just think we was having a game plan, and then you have A, B, C, and D, and that would be the end. They just started throwing things there, so that's why it didn't fail.
I think your internet provider's over throttling you or something. Because at first we'll hear you, and then it will all go.
Yeah, it starts to be staticky.
Well, yeah, I guess one of the things that along with all the science fiction and the mythological stuff is the core of Superman. What struck me, the core of Superman as this very positive, very hopeful character, and maybe DC regularly just doesn't feel comfortable with that. They want their core character to be gritty in some way, and they keep trying to do something with Superman, and that is the wrong direction, I guess.
Yeah, I would think that, with Wonder Woman's run ending, and I think in a week or two when issue 35 comes out, that kind of formula, that would definitely work, with Superman. You kind of see it here where you have, Superman's death being just kind of the one that starts it off, but the adventures and what he has to go through takes over all the rest of the series until the final 2 or 3 issues, where you kind of get, his death coming to a head and his fight with Lex. And I just think that writers could, this is kind of how I felt about Doomed in the beginning, when you had the Doomsday virus take over Superman. I thought that was going to be the central part of it, and you could branch something out with that, because that's an idea in itself. But when Greg Pak and Charles Soule, they kind of they put all their eggs in one basket. They threw villains left and right, and it just got lost in there. And I just think that, looking at Wonder Woman's run and how that, from the firstborn and building that up all the way to the final issue, I don't know why writers, more utilize that formula. But it may be because of the events and stuff like that, and how much books tie in with each other, and it really has to take a special writer like Brian Azzarello to have that kind of power to have that book just stand alone on its own. So, that's kind of like where what I think Superman should, the story it should be an overarching, more than, it should be taking an idea and branching it out with any new Superman story.
It'd be nice if they just left at least one of the Superman books, like Action or something,
Yeah,
by itself,
Action
and
would be
just
good.
let it explore Superman and not the rest of the DC universe or something.
Yeah, like that's what Superman, the Jeff Johns and John Romita Jr. run is doing. It's kind of just on its own. So it's only 2 issues in, and it it's more of Metropolis. Oh. Hello?
Oh, we got you back, Stephen.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So the Jeff Johns, John Romita Jr. Superman just deals. It's more. It's not about. It's more about Metropolis and. Him meeting another Man of Tomorrow from the future, and kind of just keeping those 2 elements just together and branching that off into other things. I think right now that's the best Superman book through 2 issues. But I don't know. It's really Superman. The Superman titles are really in a state of flux right now. I'm even considering just dropping it just for a little bit, just to see how it goes. That's how much I've been thinking about it, because it's just like it's not up to par to where Batman and Wonder Woman are. When you look at the New 52, you have what Superman story would you give? Would you recommend to somebody? With Batman, you can have Court of the Owls or Death of the Family. With Wonder Woman, you can give them the Azzarello run. But with Superman, it's just so jumbled. You can give them the Grant Morrison run, but after reading it, it just gets really confusing, and that would just be a turn off to the character. So
yeah.
I
might want to send someone like LaRasa back to the beginning of John Byrne's run, when he did that Man of Steel miniseries. That
that's
would be a lot of fun to read.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, it sounds very complicated what you're talking about, the new Superman. So it's becoming, even for me, to delve into the characters, like, okay, that sounds very complicated. But I think it is what it is. When I was researching a little bit about Superman, just tiny bit, I wasn't overdoing it, just because I didn't want to put any ideas in my head before I actually read anything. It's 75 years of it, or more than 75 years of history. So just bringing something into the character itself, it should be very difficult even thinking about where we're going to go now this time. What I always see in the comic book shops or whatever I see, the Superman, especially New Days, is always very angry, very gritty, always big buffy character. So kind of it's never did appeal to me that. And I think what Grant Morrison's book did appeal to me is that kind of that positiveness, that naivety towards things, like humanity. This is it, I'm just working for them, and he has the goal for it. And in that All-Star Superman, that's what we get. And yeah, I think in the new Superman, I looked it up I flipped 2 pages, but just because of I don't know where it goes. And as you guys say now, it's so complicated. Way with what they're writing, it's not really appealing. Still, after reading this, I was like, maybe I should try Action Comics of New 52 or something, somewhere there. But I looked up a couple of things. I read a few lines. It's like, what the hell is happening? Okay, let's,
Maybe trades or back issues of the recently ended Adventures of Superman, which had all those separate stories in it. That had a lot of good stuff, and it had a lot of the hopeful, optimist Superman.
Yeah, and the red underwear Superman.
The red underwear Superman. Yeah, those are really good. And the other thing I suggest is maybe looking for these trades, Superman in the 70s and Superman in the 60s.
Wow.
They're a good sampling of this kind of classic Superman. Almost all drawn by Kurt Swan. I think he drew Superman for 3 or 4 decades.
Wow.
Superman from the 50s is good too. I don't know where that is. But you definitely read them as historical artifacts, but they're a lot of fun.
So if a new person would come to you and say, what kind of New 52 Superman is, what would you say to them? How do you describe it?
I don't know what the new Superman
It's
is.
it really is. I really couldn't tell you. I would probably be at a loss for words. Like I really don't know, and I just would kind of just steer you away from this New 52 Superman till steady waters are here, and there's actually a really, a solid story out there. Because right now it's been very up and down, more down than previously right now. But yeah, I mean, Jeff Johns and John Romita Jr. are they're 2 issues in. They're doing okay. I would just probably wait for the trade for that. But right now, it's yeah. And I never understood, like with Action Comics in the Grant Morrison run, how they just killed off Jonathan and Martha Kent, and that kind of, I don't know, that kind of stuck with me. Just saying like, here's this young and brash Superman that they're trying to build up. And you would need your like, who would he get advice from? Like when he's kind of confused on what to do, where's that person he could talk to? Is it Batman? I really, it kind of started off really rocky with the New 52. So yeah, that's really all I could really say about it.
One of the funny things about Superman to me is that in a way Lex Luthor is right. I mean, here's an all-powerful alien helping us, but how can we trust him? And when you talk about, the young, brash Superman without his parents, without any guidance, that would make me pretty nervous, if I were Batman or Green Lantern or whatever. Like, who is this guy who can just do whatever he wants, but maybe rudderless? To almost accept Superman as a superhero, you have to have him be kind of noble and pure, or he's too dangerous. He's too easily out of control.
So he's a character which is really kind of difficult to even approach at the end of the day, because he has so many, he's too strong, he's too clever, he's too good for anything else, so where do you go with that? So
right. And somehow Grant Morrison showed all the writers how they would do it. But they didn't learn their lesson from him. Because he didn't even learn his own lesson. I need to go through parts of his action run. I need to try to read the whole Grant Morrison action run and see if there's more to it than I caught when I read the little bits of it.
Was this mini-series based part of the universe, or is it just a branch off and let him go run free, Grant Morrison, and just write it down, this 12-issue series?
That's what it was. It was just do whatever you want and outside of continuity.
So maybe that's the freedom of that, having freedom of just write whatever you want of Superman. That's what led him to write this kind of a great story of Superman.
And that's why the Adventures of Superman series was good. Carlos, do you want to see if we can hear you? Have thoughts about all of this?
Can you hear me? I mean, I took off my headphones, so I thought maybe that was the problem. Can you hear me?
We can hear you so far. I think it's your internet provider's the problem, but let's give it a try.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I think the problem with Superman is really that he's an icon. So the mainstream character, they don't really want to mess with him as much as if you do alternate versions of the character. So I think like with Wonder Woman, a lot of people said this isn't my Wonder Woman, so I'm not going to like it because they went far away from the mold. So if they try to do that with Superman, I think there's going to be a lot of angry people.
That's true, but ironically they end up with angry people anyway because Superman's so undefined and blurry at the moment. Oh, yeah, try again, Carlos.
People that love the Superman, and the voice, because it wasn't their Superman, so we need everybody's got their own take on it, so it's not please everybody. And I think balancing all the elements throughout history to make a much more likable Superman to a lot more people and make it more appealing to him, like All-Star did.
We're losing you again, Carlos. I'm sorry. It's just I think it's an internet provider problem. Your provider's not giving you much upload. That kind of threw me off. Well, another thing that struck me that was interesting in our community crossover was Earl Grey over in Germany talking about Superman and the discomfort with it, and you definitely could view Superman as or Superman could easily be turned into a fascist kind of character, and some other comics that play with Superman, turn him into this, or like he's kind of a fascist character in the Frank Miller Batman book.
Kind of. Yeah.
He is a fascist character. It seems like, to me, it seems like Grant Morrison skirts this fascist side of him a little bit. Did you ever, La Raza, have, coming from Europe, have a sense of American superheroes as a fascist kind of thing, or Superman, or?
No, not really. I never even thought about it, actually, honestly. Until Earl Grey has mentioned it. It was like, his video was just like, okay, maybe I should put it in a different way, in different light. Actually made me question a couple of things, but no, not really what he said was that fascist and stuff. So no, not really.
In the introduction to one of these books, Mark Waid talks about Superman always reflecting his times. So at first, in the late 30s, he was helping the working man and all of that kind of stuff, because in America at the time, people were very concerned with that, with the Great Depression and everything. And then after World War II, he became kind of a fatherly figure, because America kind of wanted to be the fatherly figure, policing the world, but as the good guys in our mind anyway. And I did notice in a lot of my, let me see if I can find them, in a lot of my 70s Supermans, there's a lot of anxiety. He's always, I don't know, it was a very anxious decade where people didn't feel quite comfortable. So bad things are always happening to Superman, and that's also a pattern, I guess, in the 50s and 60s, where he gets old, or like here, the American Indians are tying him up and burning him. And in another one, he has a son who turns into some kind of were monkey or something.
Oh my God!
It just seems like it's very clear that looking at the 70s, that this is an age of anxiety, and people don't quite feel comfortable with themselves, probably because of all the protests in Vietnam and all of that in the U.S. I'm not sure whether Superman reflects ourselves anymore. I'm not sure. I guess because I'm too close to it. It's easy to look back at the 70s. It's hard to say what we thought about ourselves, in the 90s or now.
Well, you can carry it forward. I mean, part of that ties back to what Carlos was talking about with Superman being an icon, where when you try to change or do something with him, you run into problems. And what happened in the 90s, of course, was that split where they made him red and blue. And that might be a little more representative now than it was then, and they could have played with it more. But that idea of trying to play with the character, represent the times, I think plays well. And I think you guys were kind of quick to throw Grant Morrison under the bus with the action run, because that's part of what sets All-Star apart. Was the idea of it was to represent Superman as the classical icon and take it. The introduction of Action Comics, more so than Superman with the New 52, was to do something different. And one of the most telling differences about the characters between All-Star and that relaunched Action Run is the use of him as a journalist. And that's something that I think is really key. In All-Star, he's a journalist as a day job. Like, basically, they show him at his desk. They don't really play with it too much, except for him writing his own eulogy, which is weird.
Yeah.
But in Action Comics, him being a journalist is what pushes him forward and is what keeps him current and also allows kind of the villain of the week to arise.
Yeah.
And so that's the other big thing, too, is we're dealing with a distilled story of 12 issues where you play something, you have a finality, which allows it to be stronger and better, which is a big problem with most comics, as they never seem to arrive at an ending, versus Action Comics, which will never end, or at least you know. There's a lot wrapped up in there, and I just kind of want to.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that strikes me as I'm just looking at the All-Star Superman is, to me, maybe he represents, or these stories represent, a kind of anxiety about a future that's coming at us too fast. You know, particularly like the Lois Lane issue where she's in the Fortress of Solitude. I don't know, the science fictioniness of it makes me, and there's so much technology. There's that good mad scientist who has his headquarters on the moon, I think, or on Mars. I think. Was it
Yeah.
the moon?
Yeah, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like, I don't know. Sometimes I think maybe one thing we're experiencing in our culture right now is this future coming at us too fast, too many technologies, and possibly global warming and all of these other problems that we can't seem to get a grasp on. I don't know. I'm grasping at straws as to what he may symbolize. But. And in Doomed, maybe that as bad as that series is, Superman becomes the enemy, right?
Yeah. He basically becomes enemy of the state, and everyone's basically, the United States basically trying to get him, or trying to kick him off the planet because, with the Doomsday virus, he's very unpredictable and stuff. So that's like the start of when he goes to space, and then the Brainiac thing starts to come together, and then yeah.
Well, Damien, off of what you were saying with the fear of technology and everything, I mean, All-Star Superman really is Lex and Superman. The thing is, Superman uses all that, I'm just going to call it super science, for lack of a better term.
That's a good word.
Yeah.
Science magic, yeah, super science. He trades on that to accomplish goals. He uses it. Lex trades on it as a weapon. He's using it to try to take down Superman until he starts trading on it so far, until he literally rises to Superman's level at the end. And at that point, he sees the light, and he sees that there's bigger goals to accomplish. And so by getting that far and using that tool, he understands what the heroic thing is. And but at that point, you tie back into what you brought up in the initial intro, into the idea that All-Star Superman plays on, like, the 12 Feats of Hercules, and also is kind of reminiscent of the Sword in the Stone. So, like, that idea of the hero, but the closer you get to the hero, even as the villain, because the villain is closest to the hero, you start to see what it's used for, and that's the intent, and that's the ethos that we were talking about earlier. So I feel that all ties in, that all works.
So it's kind of good science versus bad science in a way. With Lex.
It's how you use it, yeah.
Yeah.
I think they maybe played down in regular comics Superman as a super scientist because he already has so many advantages over his enemies to make him also super smart and have endless super inventions. Makes him that much more unstoppable. But it's so fun. I think they need to go for the fun in a way, which is what Morrison did even in the context of a modern-looking comic book.
Yeah.
So,
it's not an easy character to talk to about, isn't it?
I know we're
Well,
kind
for
of
me
Yeah.
especially, because I'm not really sure about Bizarro and all this surrounding characters. It was just wasn't mentioned in this book, you know. So
Yeah.
it's the character itself. Maybe that's why it becomes so unachievable to talk about sometimes for me as well. To know exactly his weaknesses and what it's all about. And
Yeah, Bizarro always stumps me. I don't know what the point of him is. And then
Yeah.
such a simple character has lasted so long. Did you have a thought on him, Steve?
Well, those two issues that Carlos and LaRosa did, those were the two issues that stumped me. Like, I read this like 2 or 3 times, and I still, to this time, are just, it's Grant Morrison, but still, I really like Sabaro.
Uh-huh.
I really wish, he could have found a way out.
Yeah.
Because it's like his creativity was there, but no one could really grasp it, and it's just like, I don't know, he just felt so stuck, and I kind of felt for the character. So
Yeah, I was actually kind of rooting for him when I was reading the issue. It was like, go on,
Yeah.
go on. Is he gonna go there? Is he gonna kind of actually go away from this
Uh-huh.
Superman?
yeah, but they did get this poetry towards the end. Superman mentions Zabaro's poetry, so
Yeah.
that was really touching. So
I heard somewhere written about that Zabaro was actually Grant Morrison in a comic. That's him is saying to Superman the way how much he's appreciating the character, and he's basically showing this poem as like it's saying, I'm writing these 12 issues of you. Do you actually like it? Are you enjoying it? So I heard somewhere written that or read somewhere that actually Zabaro probably was a Grant Morrison the way he wanted to be, like he put himself into it as well because he appreciates the character that much. But that's what I just only heard, so I'm not
Now
sure
it
if it's
makes
true
me
though.
read it with that point of view.
that makes sense. Like Grant Morrison's like, understand me. This is all my complex
Yeah.
ideas, and everyone's just like, I don't know what you're talking about.
And he lives down below in some bizarre subterranean mental world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not the first time he's done that either, so
Yeah.
I viewed it as this kind of just a journey deep into absurdity
Yeah.
with this tragic character of Zabaro.
Mhm.
But it is surprising that he chose Bizarro or Bizarros to take up 2 issues when most things only took up 1.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's such a complex at the end of the character that Bizarro is. Or to actually, it's after reading those 2 issues, I'm not really sure what as a Bizarro is all about. Why they are there? As I know it's part of its enemies. At the end of the day, it's been made a clone opposite of Superman. So with a flaws still. So maybe that's why he ended up choosing to maybe tell the story in 2 issues. To actually maybe try to people to explain what it's all about,
Right.
Yeah.
It's almost 2 different Bizarro stories pushed together in a way.
Yeah.
Mhm. So is there like so I know that issue 10 is my favorite issue out of the whole series. Do you guys have a favorite issue where you just
For me, it's the Lois Lane one. I think it was number 2 or number 3.
Number
Completely.
2 has her inside the fortress. That's one of my
Yeah.
favorites.
Yeah.
I really like the Jimmy Olsen issue just because it's much more fun.
That was cross-dressing. I was like, what the hell is that?
I kind of love the Lex Luthor in prisons one.
Oh yeah, that was good too.
Interviewing him. I love the fake bumbling Clark Kent.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
The truth is, I love every issue except for the Bizarro Planet one. That one just
Yeah, that was the one.
Yeah.
That
right with me.
I couldn't. Yeah, there's.
I stuck you with that one, Larasa.
No, you know what? At the end of the day, you have to have something different in the story. I mean, none of them has to. I mean, for me, when I read them all, that complicating part of that 2 issues made me think more about Superman and then the way it happens. What is this Bizarro? What really frustrated me all the time was reading to understand what actually they're saying. it took me so long. It's like, what the hell does that mean? I want to flip pages. I'm not going to read this. And then I went back. I was like, okay. And then I put that no and it's yes and flip. Or yeah, it was kind of a crazy journey through that issue. As English is not my first language, so it was even more complicated. So I was like, what the hell is going on here?
It took me hours. It took me hours.
Talking about with language.
Yeah. So
I skipped it. I can't deal with that. That's why I don't.
it's like, now, let's leave it alone.
It's okay. Don't worry about it.
Well, and that's a big thing too. Is at the end of the day, Superman doesn't have that many villains, so they keep coming back to Bizarro, and I just no, thank you.
Yeah.
There's a Comic Alliance website, and they have made 75 or no, not 75 or 10 best issues of Superman in there, and they talked about how many villains they have. The Superman has. They're like Brainiac. I'm sorry if I'm not going to mention them all. Brainiac and Bizarro, who ones do I remember the most? But they were like quite a lot of characters made, but they weren't developed further into being more into the world of Superman.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it seems over the years they tried to introduce new ones. Like in the 70s, they had this guy Terra Man, and I've seen him in the cartoons and stuff. I don't know if they've ever used him since the 70s in the comic books. There was that graphic novel I read about Atlas, where they brought back this character Atlas from Jack Kirby, but then they dropped him. They seem to fall back a lot on Krypton, things coming back from Krypton. Didn't Jeff Johns do a big thing about a new Krypton? And then they had that Hell series, wasn't he from Krypton?
Yeah.
But then it kind of, to me, that weakens Krypton after a while when we see too much of Krypton's past. It's almost better as a distant thing for me.
Yeah, too many last son of Kryptons. Like all these Kryptonians come back, and it's just, all right, he's not the last son of Krypton anymore. If all these people keep coming back, or.
My ultimate takeaway is, because Superman was the very first superhero anyone ever thought up, that he's very primal and very much more like a fairy tale than the other ones, and that he's not as well served by the modern need to make things more, quote, realistic, even though comics are not very realistic. They try to somehow ground them in this imaginary real world, and Superman just doesn't really fit to me. And that's why Grant Morrison getting to do it, you know, off in his own little pocket universe, or Adventures of Superman, or the way they used to do it in the 50s or 60s, works better for him.
Mm-hmm.
What about the story of Red Sun? I'm so completely off the subject, but it's just, Red Sun is Superman's story, isn't it?
Right, that's an Elseworlds story, and maybe that's another place where there can be some good Superman stories. It's an Elseworlds where what if Kal-El's spaceship crash landed in Soviet Russia?
Oh, that's a great place to be.
And I still need to read that one. I own it, but I haven't read it.
Oh my gosh. So what kills me when I look at Superman best of lists and whatnot is how many times they frickin' retell the origin. That seems to be what people gravitate to. And that's another thing that sets All-Star Superman apart, is the origin's like a page.
A page, 4 panels, that's it.
That's all it ever should be. I'm so sick of that story.
I know.
Yeah, it's really what he becomes is what's the interesting part.
Well, to us, I guess to most people, who's the Superman character? And what's going?
I think people think they can fix him by rejiggering his origin each time. But
well, what's the fixing is for needed anyway? I mean, you have a character, you have your own origin. This is where it come from. Leave it alone. Let him do something, something else at the end of the day.
Well, and I don't think any other major superhero has this problem. Like, Batman has tons of stories that people love that's not his origin.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Spider-Man has tons that People don't care about his origin. People don't even really care about Deadpool's origin. He has tons of stuff. Like, there's all these characters, and they don't keep coming back to that one thing. I don't know. I think that's the biggest gripe with Superman.
Well, maybe there is something more to it. Why do they keep coming back to it? I don't know, but they do, and
yeah, I don't know what they want to add. Like, they add to that. It's pretty much a straightforward origin. So.
Well, a lot of times they add in a lot of action with gunplay or do a whole thing with Krypton so they can set up a whole set of villains. That tends to be the two big pushes.
And somehow I think maybe there's this insecurity of how can he, with all his superpowers, how can he be trusted and be good? And maybe going back to his parents and his Smallville roots somehow is reassuring.
Yeah.
It seems like
Carlos,
they
do you
created a
want
character.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Rasa.
No, it seems like they created a character where it's so difficult to approach him, even though he's such an icon of everybody, and everybody has an opinion about Superman. No matter, I spoke to my husband about Superman. He said, "What do you think about Superman? What is this all about?" And he says, "Oh, he's a strong man from Krypton." That's it. That's what he said. He's like, "That's what I know about Superman." And at the end of the day, people, some of them know, some of them don't, but they still have an opinion about it. Especially when you watch movies, and how most opinions comes from.
Well, everyone's heard of Superman, even if they've never watched a movie about him or seen a comic book. They still know who he is.
And it's such an icon, as we keep on mentioning that, It seems like you always see that S, and what is S stands for? Superman, Even you ask kids nowadays, you say, what does S stands for? And they would say Superman. So there's still there, there's a character.
Carlos, do you want to try again and see? Do you have thoughts on his origin always being retold, or?
No. Anyways, the origin thing that was starting to be used a lot in Silver Age for some reason, because in the Golden Age that didn't really matter until around like the early 50s, the whole Silver Age. I don't know why I just wanted to emphasize the whole science fiction thing there. I found that very curious that they just keep going back to that. And everything and from the and so
It's just not working, Carlos. I don't know. It's funny how we'll hear you for a few sentences and then you go away. Sorry about that.
yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess to wrap things up, I would recommend people dig up those Adventures of Superman. I think they came out with 17 issues. It just ended this past month.
No
and
more.
Might have been the best recent Superman.
Yeah.
Are they going to do it in a trade?
I think they have a trade or two of it out already.
The first 2 volumes are out, so.
And there's tons of good stories in there. And then if you want to go deeper, I think what have you got there?
Emperor Joker, one of my favorite Superman stories.
Really?
It's fun, but calling it a Superman story is a little.
It's more of a Joker story.
Well, yeah.
Go back and look at the old stuff from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. I think it's a lot of fun. It's not at all like modern comics, of course.
Yeah. It'd be like also Alan Moore Superman. I know that he only did a couple issues, but
was that Whatever Happened to Superman or something like that?
Yeah, it was Action Comics 583 and then 423 of Superman. Those are like the Whatever Happened to Man of Tomorrow and Superman Annual 11, the one with Mongol and the Black Mercy. That's one of my favorites. And it's just a standalone issue, and it was actually made into a cartoon or an episode of Justice League or something like that. So.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's definitely one of the classics that people
Mhm.
point to.
Mhm.
And the early John Byrne Superman, I guess, is the other one that I recommend.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah,
is
there's a
Man
lot
of
of
Steel.
stuff. There's a ton of stuff. Just
Yeah, you
not
just need to
in the
look
new
for it.
52. Not in the new 52 right now. I'll let you know. When I find a good Superman store, I will make a video on it. I will just, guys, you need to
Actually,
jump on the
talking
train right
about
now.
New 52, I just got my friend just gave it to me like 8 issues, no, 6 issues of also Superman, no Action Comics with Grant Morrison, the New 52.
Okay.
So I haven't even read them yet, but I have them. My friend just like, oh yeah, you go here's some Action Comics. Like, okay, where does this come from?
He was happy to get rid of them.
Well, probably.
Well,
So
I guess
Well,
I have a
Carlos,
question.
maybe you can make a separate video someday where you recommend the best Supermans that you know of, since we can't really hear you today, unfortunately. Yeah.
You wait for me a little bit. I'll get you something.
Oh, great, great.
Well, what I wanted to ask, I guess, you guys, is what is the most recent Superman story you can think of that was up to your bar as far as
Like-
quality is?
Like a new 52 wise, or just what I've read?
Most recent, so however far back you have to go, but the most recent take on Superman, because for a while they've been toying with Superman since before the New 52.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
It's some of the stuff that doesn't really deal within the there's Superman for Tomorrow with Brian Azzarello and Jim Lee.
okay, that's
Like there's so many issues of Action Comics and Superman stuff. Like
Yeah.
I started with the New 52, and when that really didn't work, I went to those lists to see,
Yeah.
and most of that stuff was, not really too recent. Like, I don't know when Superman's Secret Identity with Kurt Busiek and Stuart Immelman, when that came out. I'm not sure, but
that was relatively recent.
yeah, I really can't put a year on it. But it's just a
I
story.
can.
Okay, go ahead.
Hold on a second. 2004.
2004. Another one would be Superman for All Seasons, the Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale one. That was also one of the first ones I read, and I don't know what year that was either.
That definitely predates this one. So
Yeah. So, I mean, there wasn't really anything within the action. Well, how about Last Son of Krypton with Richard Donner and Jeff Johns when they did that? I think that was
pretty close to right before the
close.
52.
Yeah. So okay, I'll stick to that one. That's the only one I
Okay.
truly remember. So that was a pretty good story as well. So
Yeah. Now, how about you, Damien?
I can't, in the mainstream of Superman, it just goes. I haven't read enough of the pre-52 recent years to really recommend stuff, until going back to the. I seem to remember liking some of the stuff in the 90s, either before or after the death of Superman, but I just can't remember specifics anymore.
Okay.
And the John Byrne stuff stuck out to me.
mhm.
I feel like there was a lot in the 80s and the late 70s was a lot of good stuff here and there. I seem to remember a good Marv Wolfman run, and I seem to remember some good periods where George Luis Garcia, or however, Jorge Luis Garcia was the artist, but I can't.
Mhm.
It's all been a long, long time since I've read that stuff. I can't pin it down in my head.
Like how was when Jack Kirby was on Superman? How was those kind of stories? Like
He was
were
never on Superman. He did,
really?
he did Jimmy Olsen.
Jimmy Olsen? Yeah. How many issues did he do of that?
I think he did about 11 or
12?
12 issues of it. They were wild. I mean, that's where he introduced Darkseid,
Yeah.
all kinds of
Really?
crazy
Yeah.
characters. And then he had one issue where Don Rickles shows up.
So Darkseid's really Jimmy Olsen's nemesis, and it just spun out from there.
Right.
Yeah. It's
So,
weird.
Superman there, is just this super being that shows up every once in a while.
Hmm. Yeah, because I saw like I don't know if you guys know Arlen Schumer. He does some YouTube videos, and he had these. He talked about Jack Kirby and how would they like he would draw Superman, and they wouldn't like his drawings of Superman, especially in his face. So they kind of replaced his face with someone else. Basically, they drew over him, and I was really interested in checking out Jack Kirby's art on Superman. But when they talked about that, I was just kind of turned off by the idea that DC would do something like that.
Yeah, I don't think you get to see Jack Kirby draw Superman's face till those Superpowers books that he was involved.
Oh, okay.
And I need to reread those. I just recently bought them out of a 50-cent bin. I read them back in the early 80s, but I don't really recall them clearly.
That's crazy. 50 cents for those? I can barely find those things.
Well, if I find them again, I'll buy them for $1 and send them to you.
All right.
Wow.
But yeah, so for a really long time, they wanted Superman to look one way,
Mm-hmm.
and here's a splash page. It doesn't have Superman. Let me see if I can. In this one from the 70s, it has a Jimmy Olsen, Jack Kirby. Yeah, you can't see it too well, but there's a Jack Kirby body with a Kurt Swan face on it.
Oh yeah.
So they had a corporate idea that every character's face should be there should be a certain style, and it would always be done that way. And Jack Kirby just, for whatever reason, either refused or just couldn't to draw in other people's styles.
Yeah.
It's kind of the opposite extreme now. Like, well, I noticed it in Batman Eternal because every week it's a different artist. The people's faces, bear no resemblance to each other. It's like going one way to the other.
I don't understand how they not just decided how the character should be looking at the end of the day. The features he still can be able, as like me, myself, I can draw. So I was like, when I was reading Batman Eternal, that detective, that young one, the replacement
Bard. Right.
Yeah. And every single time I was like, what the hell, why is so different looking? Because there's some similarity features you can put into drawing.
Right.
The character way. Slightly it doesn't have to be that looking the same, but you can just slightly make him a bit more the same looking. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a weird thing in comics right now where they don't even try.
Yeah.
Or in some comics.
Mm-hmm.
Well, unless anyone has some other aspect they want to bring up, I think I'll just wrap it up here. Thank you to everyone. Everyone did a fantastic job in the community crossover, and it was a real thrill to have all of you be involved. And so, bye all.
All right. See you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.